Well, it's been a long haul for many southern Alberta businesses. Will the economy recover with the lifting of restrictions this summer? And will it last? Joining me to discuss the southern Alberta economic situation is Trevor Lewington, CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. Trevor, welcome once again to the show.
Thanks for having me back. Great to be here.
Absolutely. So, Trevor, first of all, do we have any numbers on how many Lethbridge businesses have actually closed their doors due to COVID? How bad is it?
Yeah, we know some businesses certainly didn't make it through the pandemic, and there have been some closures. The challenge for us is that there aren't any really great numbers to use as yet. So, bankruptcies, as an example, we use business bankruptcies as a bit of a way to measure that. They're about the same as they were for the last 2 years, but we know it can take 6 to 12 months for bankruptcies to show up in the system. So, hopefully, government supports that were out there for rent subsidy, wage subsidy have helped most businesses get through the pandemic. And right now, business licenses for new businesses in the city of Lethbridge, at least, have rebounded. So we're pretty
Wow.
optimistic, hopefully, that we won't see too much pain and suffering.
That is a little bit of good news there, absolutely. So have you heard how the surrounding southern Alberta communities are doing? Are they doing any better or worse than Lethbridge?
Yeah, we see economic data, for example, from cities like Medicine Hat that we know is struggling a little bit more so than we are. They're a little bit more reliant on oil and gas, as an example. Lethbridge has a slightly more diversified economy. But the surrounding region, everything that we've seen so far, it seems to be pretty positive. Most municipal governments received extra funding last year from the provincial government that should help municipalities. And we haven't seen any major closures or major sort of economic changes in the surrounding region. So far, so good.
So owners of restaurants, gyms, theaters, hair salons, etc., of course, they're all excited to be open back up once again. But I understand that one of the challenges is that these kinds of businesses are having a tough time finding workers to fill those job vacancies. So is this because some individuals are choosing to stay home and receive government COVID benefits instead?
Well, we do an annual survey of the business community, and every year workforce is always at the top of the list. So Lethbridge has historically struggled to find the right numbers and amounts of qualified workers. So that's a challenge across all industries. We also understand that a lot of people during the pandemic decided to go back to school. So that could be a partial explanation. People taking a lot of online learning opportunities since they were, boarded up at home anyway. But we do know that certainly there's a bit of a concern in terms of people being able to hire and find the right number of staff to run their businesses. So that's something we're going to have to watch very closely moving forward.
Definitely. Now, some say that workers may be hesitant to go back to work and customers may not be flocking back to stores right away out of lingering fears of catching COVID. So what have you been hearing about this?
We're definitely hearing that from both customers who are hesitant to go back to businesses like a movie theater, as an example. Certainly, some employers have noted staff are struggling with the concept of going back and whether or not they'll feel protected. So it's definitely a legitimate issue. I guess what I would say is that for businesses, there are steps they can take, of course, to protect their workers, whether it's personal protective equipment or voluntary masking. Even if there's no provincial mandate, people could still choose to wear a mask. And we don't want to forget the things we've learned during the pandemic, better hygiene around washing our hands and keeping our distance from people, staying home when we're sick. So I think we just have to reinforce those things. And a reminder to consumers that if you're concerned about going to a particular type of business, maybe it's a restaurant, have that conversation with the business. Phone the restaurant, find out what precautions they're taking, and make sure you ask those tough questions rather than just make an assumption that perhaps it's not safe. So we're seeing vaccination rates rise. We're seeing the province, quote unquote, open for summer according to the province's plan. But if people have concerns, they should ask questions and talk to a healthcare professional and find out more.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what you were saying that hopefully this reinforces the hand washing and the better hygiene and stuff. So if anything was to come out of COVID, maybe that's the one positive, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, is Alberta finally seeing a bit of a rebound in oil and gas prices? I know gas prices shot up a bit last week or so, but are we seeing more of a evening out now?
We have seen oil and gas prices increase. Certainly, there's volatility in the market, and we're all feeling the pain at the pumps, unfortunately, or watching our monthly natural gas bills. But that's really good news for the province. That means additional revenues for government coffers. That means there's additional royalty income. So as long as that's sustainable and sort of, at least for the medium term, stays at those levels, the provincial government will be happy. There should be additional funds available. Of course, it puts additional pressure on consumers. And right now, the medium term forecast is for oil and gas to stay roughly where it is. This isn't a short term blip. We expect the prices to stabilize around this level, at least for now.
Now, even though our economy here in Lethbridge isn't necessarily dependent on oil, are there any thoughts on how this could affect us one way or another?
Yeah, as the old adage goes, wherever oil and gas goes, Alberta follows. And certainly, the impact of the oil and gas sector on the province is significant. So it's good news for all of Alberta, including Lethbridge, when oil and gas recovers. But we have to remember there's a number of Lethbridge manufacturers and service companies that sell to the oil and gas sector. So they certainly feel the pain, even here in Lethbridge, when that sector contracts or suspends capital spending and big projects. So any increase is good news for the whole province, but certainly there are Lethbridge companies that will benefit as well.
Now, some other good news is that the unemployment rate for Lethbridge Medicine Hat region it keeps dropping. So I believe it was at 7.3% for May. So how does Lethbridge compare with other cities across Alberta?
Yeah, the Lethbridge Medicine Hat region has one of the lowest unemployment rates in the province. So that's great news in the sense that we're a better performing market compared to the rest of Alberta. And if you look at the city of Lethbridge itself, it's even a lower number than that. So the city itself is performing far better than the region from an unemployment perspective. So that's good. The challenge in the last 2 months is that it's actually been because of a drop in the participation rate. So what that means is people are actually leaving the workforce, potentially retirements, potentially people going back to school. But rather than having actually more jobs in the economy in the last couple of months, it meant more people stopped looking for work. So that's a bit of a concern to us. The number is a bit misleading. So it's something we'll have to keep an eye on very closely.
Interesting. Now, do you think that COVID had something to do with that, with people kind of being home and it gave them a chance to think about doing other things, maybe? Like you said, going back to school or finding other careers altogether.
Yeah, it's a guess at this point, but certainly there have been disruptions in traditional industries like accommodation and food service. All of those public health restrictions meant many hotels and restaurants were either closed or operating at very reduced staff levels. So it may have prompted people just to rethink their career path and do something different. And perhaps they're taking a break or they've decided to do something else. The good news, if we look at this year compared to a year ago, both unemployment is improved and participation is improved as well. So the workforce did increase. There are overall more jobs now than a year ago. But like I said, we're just concerned about that little trend in the last couple of months of the workforce, people sort of seeming to leave. So we'll just have to make sure we pay attention to that.
Yeah, definitely. And that does make a lot of sense. Now, what is Lethbridge looking like when it comes to holding summer events, assuming that the province opens everything back up, which we are supposed to come July 1st. So that's very exciting. So what about things like Whoop Up Days and Nika Yuka Japanese Gardens, concerts, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing mixed messages. So the city itself has chosen not to have official Canada Day celebrations, in part because of the pandemic, and more importantly, I think the limited time that was allowed for planning once those restrictions were lifted.
Yes.
Other surrounding communities near us, so the town of Raymond, for example, is moving forward with their Heritage Days that are largely over the Canada Day timeframe. We know Exhibition Park is working on some version of Whoop Up Days. It will be modified, of course, but they are looking to bring that event here. The Japanese Gardens are open. Nikayuko is hosting a number of events. And there are a number of other festivals. So the Lethbridge Electronic Music Festival, for example, is moving forward. So I think people just need to pay attention to the news and sort of keep track of different websites. There will be events throughout the summer. Some are, in fact, canceled, but many are being modified or hosted in a different way. So there will be lots to do around the Lethbridge region for the whole summer, which is exciting.
That is very good news, absolutely. Now, do you think that Southern Alberta sports fans are ready to come out and fully support baseball and rodeos?
Well, I heard anecdotally that, of course, the first Bulls game, the season opener, was very busy over at Spitz Stadium. I know the Lethbridge Hurricanes are excited to get back to a regular 68-game season come the fall. So I think people are definitely excited to get outside and get back to doing physical activities. And for the most part, it sounds like even sort of junior leagues are moving forward with games and seasons, even if they're, again, slightly modified or slightly shortened. So again, I think that whether it comes to sports, there'll be lots for people to get out and be active and lots to do as well.
Now, what feedback are you getting from the agriculture and manufacturing sector? How are things looking?
Very strong, actually. So 2020, of course, was the heart of the pandemic, largest economic crisis globally since the Great Depression. But the Lethbridge region actually saw exports rise. So our manufacturing and agriculture sectors grew exports by just over 10%. That's a very significant gain. And that is definitely opposite the provincial trend. So exports leaving Alberta to other destinations were down, but the Lethbridge region was up 10%. So we're very excited by that number. I think it underscores our strength in food and agriculture and sort of manufactured goods. And at the end of the day, whether there's an economic crisis or not, people still need to eat. So I guess that underscores the strength of our region, which is again very good news.
Well, there you go. Now, has there been a significant slowdown in new businesses opening up because of COVID? I know you mentioned earlier on in the interview that you're seeing business licenses being applied for, so that's good news. But does it look like we might see an increase in new business ventures now that things are opening up again, or did you see that slow down because of COVID?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, we definitely saw a slowdown in the number of new business licenses being requested, but that number has since bounced back. We're basically back to where we were. So I think that's a good sign of people having an interest in launching their business or doing something. I think we have seen an interest in real estate. We have seen commercial real estate transactions in the city move up, so both leases and sales, which of course we're looking for to see what the business sentiment is. Those things have gone up. We've seen pricing relatively stable in commercial real estate. So there seems to be a lot of activity. Thinking about my organization, we do, of course, investment attraction to the city. And although there has been a lot of interest, people were waiting to make decisions, but the pipeline's pretty full. There's a number of exciting projects on the horizon that if we can deliver those, that will have a positive impact as well. So I remain very optimistic for Lethbridge's opportunities in the near term.
That's fantastic. Can you give us any fearless predictions on where the Lethbridge economy is headed over the next 6 months, Trevor?
Yeah, I think overall Lethbridge will do quite well. We have a very strong base and a fairly diversified economy. As I said, exports in agriculture and manufacturing are up. That's very good news. Where there's some risk, of course, is our public sector. So Lethbridge disproportionately has a higher number of people employed in both healthcare and the post-secondary sector. And the province has signaled that as the pandemic and the managing that crisis passes, they will return back to a budget of austerity and trying to get their financial house in order. So the risk for us in Lethbridge is that those government cuts tend to disproportionately affect the local economy because we have so many people employed in those two sectors. The other thing that's on the horizon, I think, as people will have noticed in their pocketbook, whether they're buying lumber for that new deck or perhaps they're filling up their car, is inflation. We've seen higher than normal inflation affect everyone and across a broad number of goods. And I expect to see that probably for the next year. It's probably going to stay that way for some time. And that's going to put pressure both on consumers as they spend, but also on interest rates. And we're at a point where consumers have never been carrying more household debt. So any increase in the interest rates, which could come to control inflation, puts people at risk. So my advice to people is think very carefully about their purchases, think very carefully about the next year, and if they can, pay down debt and make sure they've got some flexibility as things shift in the coming months.
Great advice. Thanks so much for being with us today, Trevor.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Absolutely. Trevor Lewington is the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.